trying to get some updated information, so I want to try to go through a little checklist that I created. You know, we've been getting obviously a lot of inquiries from different media outlets about different things, so I thought we'd try to go over as many of those things in mass so that you could all have that same information and we could answer questions if we're able to here. So obviously, first and foremost, conditions on the victims, not a lot of change there for the majority of them. 2 are still in critical. We do have 2 that have been released. Our 37-year-old female and the 77-year-old male, they have been released. That's good news. The rest, not much change, except the 39-year-old female we anticipate potentially being released later today. She's the one that had a wrist, forearm wound and a back wound. Possibility that she may be released today. The other ones are all still in the hospital, 2 of which are critical. The other ones are stable. So that's probably the most important update, is that no one's worsened. The young child that had the head wound, he's made amazing progress. I saw him yesterday, and the father, they're reeling would be an understatement. You know, that poor family went through things that no family should ever have to face. You know, you've got a family of 4 and 3 are in the hospital. But the beauty sometimes of youth is they've got strength and resilience in their little bodies, and he seems to be doing well, but you know, there's still a lot of challenges ahead. So that's the update on the individuals as it relates to that. In terms of where we are in the investigation, still not a lot to tell you about motive. So far, we've not been able to uncover any written pen to paper manifesto types of things. From the scene, we seized a phone, a tablet, a MacBook Pro, 2 PC towers, 4 thumb drives, and 2 external drives. We've already got into the phone and found nothing of interest or corroborative information as it relates to motive or what set him into motion. So that's a work in progress. In terms of some of the other things seized at the house, rather extensive, so we'll go back and start at the scene. At the scene, as I mentioned in our earlier brief, we recovered a 9mm handgun, a Glock Model 43 semi-automatic. There were, now that our crime scene has processed that area, originally we had a count of 28 casings. It looks like there are now, we've accounted for 36 casings on scene, so 36 shots fired that we've been able to verify so far. We've recovered 13 bullet fragments, projectile fragments at the scene. And in addition to the Model 43 handgun recovered at scene, as I told you before, we had 2 additional magazines of 1 brand and 1 smaller brand, a 6-round magazine. Further investigation leads us to believe that he did have 2 handguns on scene. And probably we're going to believe at this point that one of the handguns he had on scene was the firearm he used to shoot himself back at the home. So recovered at the home, we recovered 1 Glock 19 semi-automatic handgun, a Sears Model 3030 rifle, a Mossberg 410 bolt-action shotgun, a Spikes Tactical AR Model multi-cal 223 rifle. That was the picture that I showed from our drone. That picture that I showed at the press conference earlier was a drone shot when our drone made entry into the home. That was on the kitchen table. We have a Browning lever action 22 rifle, Marlin bolt action 22 rifle, a Remington 243 bolt action rifle, a Winchester 12 gauge pump, a Mossberg 22 caliber bolt action, a Western Field 410 pump action shotgun, a Glock 19, as I said, we believe, already I mentioned that, a 22 caliber Rough Rider single pistol. So that's what we're in the process. In terms of ownership or acquisition, we don't have all of those run down. We do know that the weapon at scene, I believe, was purchased in 2015. 2015, legally by him. We're working, the investigative direction on the other weapons from the home to determine, acquisition dates and who owns them, et cetera. So that checks off the devices, the guns. One thing I want to point out is, we get a lot of questions on help, where to go for help. So on our webpage, oaklandsheriff.com, there's a very obvious link to a lot of different resources, mental health, counseling, whatever you might need. Should be accessible from that page. We're partnering with Community Health. Common Ground is a big partner of ours. So we encourage people to reach out if they have questions or concerns. We have amazing partners in Community Health and in Common Ground. Help's available. You should ask for it. People want to help. In terms of our team, we are flying someone in this afternoon to begin the debriefs with our team. Because they've been, quite frankly, through too much. And, we need to be there to support them. I've been asked by a number of people what, on federal and state levels, what they can do. What they can do is send resources, not just to the sheriff's office, but to the community for mental health. I've been asking for more mental health resources for the community. We're responding to mental health calls almost daily. We're responding to numerous calls a week where someone has gone off into the woods or disappeared with suicidal iterations. We literally have, during searches for people in mental health crisis, found an individual that was putting a rope around his neck to hang himself in a tree and interrupted that. It is an everyday thing in our communities across this country. There needs to be more focus on mental health for the community, more mental health resources, and a wider continuum of care, both inpatient and outpatient. It's not there. Our mental health community is struggling, and as a result, our community is struggling. Secondly, within the agencies, I have one full-time peer-to-peer person. And I have that position because I eliminated another position to create it. Law enforcement and public safety need more mental health peer-to-peer resources in their agencies. Last 2 years, police officer line of duty deaths have been through the roof. And the number that has exceeded that number is officers taking their own lives. So we need help. So everybody in Washington or in Lansing that's asking what they can do to help, that's what they can do. We could use resources in peer-to-peer programs, mental health resources for the community, co-responder programs that we're utilizing every day to try to save lives and get people into treatment, and then a continuum of services. I can't bang the drum enough about mental health. And I raise it because it appears we don't have a lot of information about this individual yet, but it appears he had been musing about different things, saying, shut your phone off, we're being watched, they are listening to us, walking around the house with weapons, talking about them listening to him, and talking about how the government was tracking them. Clearly, it appears to me, as a layperson, he's had some mental health things going on. And at this point, we still have no information that was brought to anyone's attention. So that's the other message. If you know someone that's struggling, try to get help. Loop in people. Talk to a mental health professional or your local public safety so that they're aware and can maybe get you some resources or direct you. Because every one of these things that I've studied, and I've studied them for over 25 years, when you're talking about mass casualty incidents, going all the way back to Columbine. Someone saw something and it wasn't robustly shared. Someone heard something someone is almost always in a position to know and see something, and it doesn't get shared in a complete circle that includes public safety and mental health professionals. That's how we get in front of these things. There'll be a lot of people talking about the solutions. That's the solution that we see from public safety. Someone sees something, someone hears something, and we don't connect those dots and work together to get in front of it before a tragedy happens. I've had some questions about our live 911 and our drone entering. Happy to answer any questions about that. I think I've covered most of the questions I've been getting from the media. And let me just check this to make sure. I don't see anything else. Questions? Yes.
Sheriff, Andrea from the Detroit Free Press. Can you please go over the guns used? Do you have like a tally of, or not used, sorry, the guns recovered from the home? And do you have like a tally of how many guns there were?
Well, I just read them off, so I would.
Can you go over those?
One at the scene, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At least 11 at the home.
Did you say he had 2 at the scene?
Sorry?
Did you say he had 2 at the scene, 2 handguns?
Our investigation leads us to believe now that he had one that he left at the scene and one he took with him.
Oh, you didn't recover that when he left at the scene, gotcha.
He left one at the scene. Now we're hearing and looking at different things. It appears that he had 2 at the scene but took one with him. Yes.
Sheriff Ed White from the Associated Press. Can you elaborate on the mental health aspect of this gentleman? First, I have a couple questions in that category. First, have you been able to talk to his mother? And then also, you mentioned shut the phone off, talking about how the government was tracking him. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you're talking about? Were those things that you saw on his devices?
No, that we had heard from family members, but we have not been able to get anything more. And we have not been able to communicate any more with his mother who lived with him. She was out of state. And it's my understanding at this point she's retained counsel.
So when you say it appears he had some private struggles, I guess what are you basing that on?
The comment from the family member that he was talking about, they are listening to us, they are watching us, turn off your phone, things like that.
So that's what
And walking around the house with a handgun in his hand, talking like that.
okay, that's what he was saying with apparently
Correct.
some relatives. Did he work at all?
I am not sure if we know any employment history or any of that yet. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts still, and what I'm telling you is what we believe we know at this point. It's all subject to change because, you know, it changes rapidly in these situations.
Sure. Andres Gutierrez with CBS Detroit. Can you just talk about the red flag laws that are in place that if a loved one does have concerns about a person's mental health, how easy is it to go to the courts and walk them through the system to just explain to people out there what the system is in place to remove the weapons from these individuals?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a mental health crisis going on, there are steps and processes, you know, bring it to the attention of your local law enforcement agency. There are laws in place that allow us, and we have utilized, to go recover weapons from an individual that's in mental health crisis. I mean, we have been very involved in that, and that's something that when we see someone in crisis, that it gives us a chance to make that situation safe, why that person gets treatment or why that situation is resolved.
Is it a process where someone can walk into the court and it can be done within 24 hours? I mean, how quickly can those weapons be removed?
It depends on the circumstances in terms of the totality of that within the 24 hours. You know, I can't put a specific timeline on it because it depends on each case. But I can tell you, if there's a crisis, involve public safety, involve mental health professionals immediately, sooner than later, would be my suggestion.
Sheriff, can you walk us through the GoFundMe scam and just reiterate your message to the viewers who may be watching about the warning that you had for them?
Yeah, so the question was about GoFundMe scams. We were made aware of a GoFundMe account that had a purported victim that was absolutely a false name and wasn't a victim. We investigated that. Our investigators made contact with GoFundMe. That site was shut down. The money had never been dispersed to the scammer and was returned to the donors. So we're trying to, in the midst of everything else going on, to make a validation of the sites that are legitimate. Probably what we'll do is I'll have our PIO, Steve, send out a list of what we've been able to verify to all of you and put it on our social media. You know, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of well-intentioned people out there, but we want to make sure that they're actually either representing a victim or the victims are aware of it, and they're not just scammers that are scumbags, you know, feeding on the bottom, feeding on tragedy. So there'll be a way for us to communicate on that, and we're gonna do that, yes.
Peg McNichol, Oakland Press, and the shooter lived in Shelby Township, which is in Macomb County. Did he have any history of police connections, and how closely are you working with Macomb officials on this?
Yeah, our partners, Shelby Township, were very much involved on scene. They've been awesome. All of our partners, our federal partners, you know, the ATF helped us with the E-trace on the weapon. Troy, I can't go deeply enough. Our fire department from Rochester Hills, all of our partners have been great. In terms of his contacts, we have no information on any contacts that he had with law enforcement, no arrests, no criminal history. I think someone told me the last time he had any contact with law enforcement was like 2016 for a traffic ticket. Yes,
Questions, did he drive his mom's car to that?
I'm sorry?
He drove his mom's car to the scene, correct?
That white car, was that his mom's car?
And the second is lacking of a motive. How often do you find a motive in things like this? I mean, obviously everybody has a motive, but how often does law enforcement determine one? Maybe you won't find one, there won't be anything.
Yeah, we may not be able to find one, you know, I mean, sometimes, like, for example, in the Oxford tragedy, from the devices recovered, basically very explicit, here's what I'm planning to do, here's why, I'm actually looking forward to it, you know, a kind of manifesto oftentimes presents itself when people do this. We may not find anything like that, that's part of why we're examining devices to determine if there were anything that could connect those dots. I mean, obviously the first question people have is why? How did this happen? Why did it happen? What put him into motion? And to the extent we can answer that, we're gonna try.
Sure, following up on the red flag topic that was brought up. In conversations that your investigators may have had with family members, did that come up at all? Were they aware of that law, and did that even enter their mind that maybe they should talk to someone about this gentleman, what he's saying, the fact that he has all these
Yeah,
drugs?
that, you know,
That
when
come
we
up at
had some contact with family, it was while it was still unfolding. So we didn't get into a lot other than what we needed in terms of information, tactical, those kinds of things. Now, at this point, we're not receiving much information at all. That's gonna be a work in progress.
They're not cooperating?
Well, as I mentioned, it's my understanding she's obtained counsel, so.
Does he have more family members that you've contacted besides his mother?
That's primarily the person we've been working with. She lives with him. I'm not aware of anybody else that.
Sure, can you clarify, as the 39-year-old that's about to leave the hospital today, is she the mother of those two children that are in health condition?
No, different one. No, she's still in critical. Yes.
And do you know if the family had tried to get this individual help prior to mental health
Yeah,
treatment?
we
prior
don't
to-
know. We don't know that.
Getting-
We have not, I'll follow up on that. We don't have any information that lends us to the belief that that happened. We've not been told that, and Shelby's not aware of it.
Getting back to the survivors of the shooting, you mentioned some were in stable condition, which is not technically a condition, so are they considered life-threatening condition or non-life-threatening condition but need to be hospitalized?
You know, I hate to get too deep into specific conditions, but I can tell you that, you know, at this point, we don't think anyone's in immediate peril of passing, but I don't know that medically has been determined, and that can change on a dime if,
Right.
you know, there's internal hemorrhaging or some other things.
Sure. We know usually a lot of the information is preliminary at the beginning, but can you speak on how the number of shots fired changes like that?
Well, what happened was early, we had recovered a certain number of casings. And with a much more detailed search of the scene, including a dog that was brought to the scene that's specifically trained to look for components of fired weapons, casings or fragments, more were discovered.
And he emptied all three of the mags that we found there, right?
All three of the mags were empty.
Sadly, unfortunately, this is not the first time we've seen a shooting like this in the county. With people potentially concerned, I mean, what would you say to them about safety and, moving forward?
I would say, the same thing I talk about all the time, situational awareness, not just for an active assailant. We teach active assailant courses all the time, and we have for years. But what if there's a tornado? What if there is a fire? Be aware of your situation, your venue. Movie theaters, we've seen shooting in theaters. Know the door you came in, but where are the other doors? If something happened, a tornado, a fire, an assailant, where do you go? How do you get there? Think that through a bit. The same is true when you're at outings. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's the world in which we live. And having a plan is, as I said, it's kind of like buying homeowners insurance. You don't anticipate your house is gonna burn down, but you think about it, you shop it, you purchase it, you put it in a file drawer, now you're prepared. So all of us in public safety kind of have that checklist. As we get out, we kind of check our surroundings. Something happens, here's where I'm gonna go, here's what I'm gonna do. I hate to say it, but that's what I preach. Everyone needs to be situationally aware.
You've got a lot of events that are community gatherings, not just splash pads, community pools. There's all these Juneteenth gatherings going on. Is there any sort of leveling up here of security? Are you rethinking Rochester Hills security as you move forward? Because there, 4th of July is coming up and just general.
So Rochester Hills, Oxford, super safe communities. I mean, they're lovely communities. They wouldn't come to the top of anyone's list about this gonna happen there. So all I can tell you is that terrible things can happen in amazing communities. I remember we worked a case where a woman was kidnapped and murdered from downtown Birmingham, across the street from the police station, if you remember that case. So terrible things can happen anywhere. Situational awareness. Have your own thoughts in mind of what to do if a problem arises. Are we, very much vigilant? Yes. And that's part of what we are talking to our county commissioners, our county executive, our state legislature, and our federal government. We need resources to train and equip our people to deal with those situations. I mean, part of what we're thinking all the time is what's the worst thing that could happen? How do we prevent it if possible and mitigate it if we can? So to your point, yeah, parades, big concern for us. Dream Cruise. There's no sleep that happens leading up to the Dream Cruise. You've got 13 miles of unsecured, almost 1 million people out in the public. So, we're doing a lot of things at all of those events, at festivals, at parades. We're doing overwatch with our helicopters. But we need resources to be able to do more of it. You saw in Highland Park, Illinois, I believe was the city where they had a parade. And a guy was on a rooftop and opened fire on the parade. How do you deal with that? We have ways. We have trained, but you have to have the resources and the training. And we're upping our game constantly, and we're getting more and more requests. The county sheriff's office here is getting inundated. This is probably the best word, with requests from local communities to support their parades, their festivals, their events. And we're doing it every time we can.
Sheriff, now you guys trained for that. Looks like that carried out pretty well and as best it can. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you deployed, you got there quickly, you were able to get to the trailer park, contain this guy. Can you talk a little bit about the tactical way this went down?
Yeah, I'm, again, super proud of our people in every one of these situations we've had in terms of how they get there. The amazing thing to me, quite frankly, is we don't have more accidents. I mean, whether it was going to Oxford or people coming to this scene, they're going all out. And, I hold my breath that everybody gets there safely and no one gets hurt in that response, but they go and they go 100% to get there quickly and do what they can to rush towards that danger. Because it's our belief whether it's Oxford or elsewhere, if they're shooting at us or they're looking at us or they're hearing us, now they're no longer focused on innocent victims. And, you know, that goes back to the discussion we had, you know, prior to Oxford and after Oxford. Our training is go to the threat and take the threat on, whether you're alone or whether you're in a group. And if you're not up to that job, then this job is not for you now, because that's the world in which we live. We will not be a Parkland, we will not be a Uvalde. You have to go in, even if you're alone. And that's what our people have done every time a crisis has happened. And we try to upgrade our capabilities, again, to prevent first and mitigate second. So in this case, we were in mitigation. It had already started. And thankfully, because we had layered in newer technology called Live 911, one of our sergeants at the Rochester Hills substation heard the actual 911 call before it went out over dispatch, and immediately self-deployed there and was there between a minute and 2 minutes. And on scene with, you know, to stop the threat. Now, that threat had already fled, but had that threat not, I'm confident that sergeant would have engaged that threat. And everybody else that was coming would have engaged that threat. That's what we trained to do. And then again, great police work to spot that weapon, immediately think maybe we can get some investigative lead from this. They ran that weapon, got an address, they had a description of a car, no plate, got to that address and saw a car that matched that description. 2 and 2 is an even 4 in this case. Obviously, they set a perimeter, a hard perimeter very quickly, and we knew that he was in the house. So, you know, I don't know if there was a second chapter. I've been asked that a lot. But given that the AR was on the kitchen table and he had more weapons in the house, it wouldn't surprise me that he had a next step, go someplace else or engage us in a gun battle. And thankfully, neither of those occurred because he was contained and he didn't have that opportunity.
And did you say he owned all those firearms, or did you say you're now looking at the provenance and, you know?
Those firearms were there. We don't have information on the ownership yet.
Is there a limit to the number of guns that one person can legally have?
No. There's a certain limit to how many you can buy in 1 year before you become recognized and required to be a dealer. But you can own firearms if you have no criminal history and there's no evidence of mental health. But I will also say in that point, you know, there are so many discussions about how we deal with gun violence. And yet many of the laws that we have on the books are not fully enforced. And I've said this for years. On the federal level, when you go into a gun store and attempt to make a purchase in the NICS system, it does a background check. And you're a prohibited person. You're not allowed to buy that gun. 98.5% of the people that go in are a prohibited person. They're not allowed to make the gun purchase. They're refused the gun purchase and they leave, are never prosecuted. That is frustrating. That should not be the case. And we have brought that up with the federal government for years and nothing has changed. So we've even tried enact a statute that allows local communities to be notified when a prohibited person attempts to make a purchase so that they can go run that down. Because the person's not done, they're probably gonna go get one elsewhere. And so there's so many of these layers that we could do, we could all agree on. But it seems every time there's a tragedy, people go to their corners and then start throwing rocks at each other. Rather than all of these things that are very obvious and could make a big difference in what we see every day in violence in our community.
If someone's prosecuted for attempting to buy a gun when they're prohibited, I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen to them?
That's a felony. If you're a prohibited person, you can be criminally charged and nothing happens. And again, if you go in and you're a prohibited person and you attempt to buy a gun and nothing happens, you're not gonna be done. And if you're already a prohibited person, why are you trying to buy a gun?
Chief, can we talk about the technology used? I mean, Live 911 played a pretty big role in making sure you guys got there quickly. And then also the drones that you guys sent inside the house. how much of a difference does that make nowadays?
Drones and Live 911, new technology can save lives, without question. And that's why we pushed Live 911 into our operations, because I had seen its potential. That, call takers are inundated. We're overwhelmed with calls with the crisis, and they've got to get a lot of specific information. And sometimes in that first 30 seconds, just having an address and hearing what's going on, you can start heading there. And the response time can be greatly improved. So seconds matter when people are in a life and death situation. So that's why, we have pushed Live 911 into our operations. And then when you marry it with other technology like the drone use at the scene, I didn't want to we have an amazing SWAT team. They do great work. But I don't want to send them into a home without them having an idea what they're facing. Is he barricaded in a corner? What kind of weapon systems does he have? Has he booby trapped anything? We don't know any of that. And if we have someone contained and there's no hostage, we can slow it down and go, okay, let's try to get information. Drones allow us to have that intel, to have that insight before we commit our people, which are very precious to me, to a life and death situation. And we can even layer those technologies together. We've been operating DFR, drones as first responders, in different communities as a pilot with amazing results. We've actually caught homicide suspects fleeing homicides using our drones that had gotten away from resources on the ground. And I think that, the applications are amazing in terms of how we can save lives, how we can make a difference.
Can we,
I just wanted to thank you, Sheriff. I'm Burnett Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills. You asked a question earlier about, unfortunately, some people take advantage of the situation and set up fake accounts to do harm to communities trying to do good. The city this morning set up a GoFundMe through our partner, the Community Foundation of Greater Rochester. So two that have been scrubbed by the Sheriff's Department that specifically assist two families impacted. But if the community wants to respond and support, the city is providing a safe space to do that on the city's website through a city-sponsored GoFundMe run by the Community Foundation of Greater Rochester. I don't believe the incident will define our community. I believe our response will, and this is the way the community can respond.
Here, quickly, I'm so sorry. Can I just ask you, is there any special meeting with the ribbon that you have on right now?
Yeah, this is these are the colors of our city. Our city council members put this together. We had 2 vigils last night, passed these out, just a way to remember the situation and those victims that are still fighting.
So another question before that. Okay.
yeah, I did want to ask, I know the splash pad is closed indefinitely at this point. As I understand it, is that correct?
What the splash pad, in terms of reopening, once we've turned it over to the city, will be up to the city. Yes.
I have a question for Mayor Barnett. I know next week you guys will be hosting the Festival of the Hills, your annual fireworks show. Will this have any impact on, that going on, or how will you move forward?
Great question. Obviously, we will consult the Sheriff's Department. We fully intend the show and the festivities to go on. It may look a little different in terms of our coverage and support of those activities, but as I said before, I believe this speaks to what we value as a community. We do value getting together, we value celebrations, we value community space, parks and being outside, and we're not going to cede that to anyone for a random event. We'll be careful, we'll learn, we'll follow the lead of the sheriff and his team, but I fully intend those events to continue forward.
Other questions?
Sure, we have a situation of a 17-year-old possibly drowned at Camp Dearborn. Do you have any preliminary information on that incident happening now?
Our strike team and our dive team are on scene. I'm not sure what the status is, so I don't have an update as yet. I got text on the way into this meeting. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. There's another emergency around the corner. We're obviously gonna do everything we can to save a person if possible and definitely recover if not.
Sheriff, just one quick follow for me. As far as any information that your investigators received about this gentleman, it was from his mother before she stopped cooperating, not any other relatives, just her?
Correct. And I wouldn't characterize it as stop cooperating, but she got a lawyer and we're not communicating directly at this point, correct?
Thank you very much.